Wait for it. Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guest, Mr. D.M. Rook, introduce himself to our listeners and viewers at home.
How's it going, everyone? I am DM Rook. I write stories that people think are good, and I'm happy to be here.
Outstanding. So you like long walks on the beach and romantic candlelight dinners? Anything cool?
Yeah, long walks on the beach. I do enjoy foot rubs and, just being pampered like the passenger princess I am.
All right, princess. I mean, you are a Marine, so it does kind of fit.
It does. It really does. We're all, just prima donnas at the end of the day.
It happens. So you're, I don't know, about a decade and some change younger than me. When you were in, was that whole crown thing a thing yet? Because that was definitely not a joke that they were telling when I was actually in. That came like after I got out at some point.
I mean, considering I don't know what you're talking about, I'm going to say no.
The running joke that Marines eat crayons.
Oh, yeah. No, that was a thing. And that continues to be a thing every time someone finds out I'm a Marine. It always goes to the crayon joke. And, I have no problem being made fun of. But, say I'm so stupid I put white out on a computer screen or something like that. Or Marine stands for muscles are required, intelligence not essential, and we're good. But, hearing the same thing over and over, we got to switch it up every once in a while. But I will say that the blue ones are probably the best.
Yeah, for us, it was always the Jarhead, Gyrene, or Uncle Sam's Misguided Children.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that one.
Yeah, that's what we heard going back. And, of course, references to the movie Jarhead, because you have to.
Oh, yeah, we do. It's either Jarhead or Full Metal Jacket.
So Jarhead is for the Marine Corps what Stripes was to the Army, I think.
Yeah, but Stripes was lighthearted and good-natured and kind of silly and fun, and then Jarhead was just depressing. So it kind of fits because I've heard from people, and you always get the thing of oh, totally would have gone to the Marine Corps, but if a DI got in my face, I would have fought him, or something that would absolutely never happen in real life. But I would also hear from people in other services is oh man, I would have gone to the Marines, but this happened or that happened or whatever. I couldn't go, so I had to go to the Navy, Army. What I hear from Marines is, man, if I was in the Air Force, things would be so much better right now.
Yeah, I actually originally tried to enlist in the Marine Corps. I knew I was going to college, so I was going to do the weekend warrior thing. And yeah. I was talking to the Marine recruiter just because I'm a Navy brat in a Navy town. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, we don't have any slots for our reservists. You've got to go active duty. And they were trying to sell it to me. Now, I didn't realize it was a hard sell tactic and that they actually did have weekend slot. They did have reserve slots. But I believed him when he said they didn't have any. And I had an academic scholarship to college. So I walked next door and signed up for the Army National Guard. And then, of course, after I had my paperwork signed, they're like, why didn't you sign with us? I'm like, you said you didn't have any spots. What do you want from me?
Yeah, no, that's funny. What I also find really kind of trippy, but also funny at the same time is that National Guard and reservists probably deploy more than active duty dudes do. One of my buddies is a Force Recon Marine, and we were just kind of shooting shit and kind of talking to him. I was like, where all did you go? And he's like, bro, I was QRF on a MEU once, and that's it. And I'm like, okay.
So I enlisted in the Guard, and then I did, because we were watercraft unit, so I was doing Riverine Squadron. The Army doesn't have those anymore. They've since passed those back to the Navy. But when I enlisted in '98, that was still a thing. Right. And so when I enlisted, it was, well, you're doing direct combat service support, and the Army doesn't even use the combat arms, combat service support, combat support as the three branches or three tracks anymore. They do it by units of maneuver, but at the time that was it. And because we did direct support for infantry units, they're like, well, you can go OSUT to infantry school, because if the Riverine Squadron boat you're on breaks, welcome to the infantry, kid.
Right.
And so I went to Fort Benning. I did the OSUT training. Found out the unit I was supposed to join when I got to college was shut down in 1974. Someone forgot to tell the MEP station. I think what happened is they recycled the unit SKU number. And so they thought the unit still existed, but that SKU number was actually a different MOS.
That's amazing.
So I got there and they sent me to truck driver school. I wasn't that good at it, and they sent me right back to the infantry.
That's amazing.
And I ended up spending 8.5 years on active duty, even though I enlisted for 1 weekend a month as a grunt. Loved every second of it.
Isn't that funny how that happens?
Yeah, that for the needs of the military clause, that gets everybody.
One of the things that, like, when I was choosing my MOS, because I was a comm guy, and I was looking at like security forces, and I was like, what do they do? And they're like, oh, they do like a lot of CQC stuff. You know, they're the ones that like guard all like the missile silos and like the nuclear places around. And I was like, oh, that seems super cool. And then like you read into the fine print and it's like, yeah, it's a job for a single contract. And then after that, you go infantry. And at least I don't know how it works in Army infantry, but in Marine infantry, if you haven't deployed, you don't rate shit. Like there's stories about like,
right.
you know, corporals and sergeants who were corporals and sergeants at security forces, and they'll go to infantry. They'll go to an infantry battalion at like their second contract, and these are E4s, E5s, and they just give them, you know, a senior lance corporal, just like this E3, and they'll tell these guys like, all right, he's in charge of you now because he's deployed and you haven't, so he rates.
I can see that. The ironic thing is so I got to a unit, there was an IRR composite unit when I deployed my second time. Yeah. Which basically means everyone who, you know, your original contract is whatever years you serve actively drilling or active duty, but then add the number of years to make it a total of 8 for the first contract, and that's your IRR time. So most people do a 6x2, I think is pretty standard, or 4x4. So my unit was comprised entirely of people who thought they'd done their time and gotten out and got called back. And so one of the guys with me had, once we got to the unit we were with, there were some there that were actually from that unit, even though at that point I'd been active duty as a training NCO for a while. And he was straight out of the Marine Corps. He had been embassy guard. I don't know what his MOS was.
Oh, MSG.
Yeah, but he was embassy guard. And they were getting ready to deploy. And he's like, well, I want to go to college, right? So I'm going to go in the Army Reserve, Army National Guard pipeline so I don't have to deploy. And then literally 14 days after he had enlisted into the National Guard, they're like, yeah, Sergeant, you got one more deployment in you. And he's like, well, if I'd have known I was going to go to war anyway, I'd have stayed with the Marines.
I keep telling people, like, they'll be like, yeah, man, I just got out and going to relax and everything else. And I'm just like, you know, you could get recalled, and they're like, oh, that'll never happen to me. And the first thing I did, or one of the first few things that I did when I got out, was like, let me go and get a rating so I can't be in like the middle of a job or doing something and then get a call and have to say like, oh, well, see ya. I don't even know how that works, but like, I didn't want to have to worry about it.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting experience being in a composite unit where like people from all over, like some of the guys I deployed with had gotten out under Clinton's early out program in 91, where they were paid to be on the inactive ready reserve list every year. The theory was they maintained their CDL because they were all truck drivers, the ones that were coming to the unit, because that was the convoy escorts for the truck drivers. Right. And the deal was they kept their CDL because you have to have the civilian license to drive the Army big rigs. Right. And they stayed in physical fitness standards of the U.S. military, which none of them did. But they got the check every month, and no one really expected anything. And just when most of them thought, well, great, you know, I've hit my minimum requirement to retire out of the Guard, and now when I'm 65, I'm going to get a double check. They're like, we got one more war for you. So we had some grandpa-looking E4s and E5s. That's right. It was an interesting experience doing that.
Wild. That is wild.
My platoon sergeant was actually a non-vet. He did I think he did like 5 years or something like that. He did 3 tours, so it would have been at least 3 years, but probably 5 to 6. And then he got out. And then he has that epiphany that almost every man who gets out of the military has at 40, when you realize if you'd stayed in, you'd be retiring right now.
Yeah.
You're still working, right? But you'd have the retirement check plus. So he went and enlisted in the Guard, ended up doing a total of 35 years, and he puts in his retirement paper, and they're like, yeah, you're not done. We got one more for you. When I first met him, so we get combat stripes for every 6 months in a combat zone, contiguous 6 months. His combat stripes went all the way up to his first sergeant rocker. I
had contemplated going back in, and I just talked to like a prior service recruiter because I figured I didn't want to do comm, but it was kind of like the best of like the options that I had because my dad told me like at the time, like I was like 21 and they had moved and I was going to college, but I didn't have the means to go to college and live on my own and do all the stuff. So I moved with them and things just and didn't end up working out. Like I went too late in the year and couldn't get back into it. And so, he's pretty much like, look, either join the military or I'll buy you a Greyhound ticket. And so I was just trying to get out of there as quick as possible. And I had good ASVAB scores. Like I got like a 69 or something. And I could have picked whichever one I wanted, but they're like, okay, we have 3 choices for you. You can do airfield, you can do comm, or I forgot what the other one was, like logistics or something. So I picked comm, but there was a part of me that was like, go into the Army, go like 68 whiskey, try to be like a medic or something cool. And I remember how it was talking to like a recruiter like on the first time going in, and they are like super nice and accommodating because like they have to be because they have to make quota. Prior service recruiters hate your guts. They don't care about you at all. Like the second they found out like your prior service coming to somewhere else, they could really give a shit less.
Yeah, it's because you don't count towards their quota.
Yeah.
I take comfort because my drill sergeant lied to me, or my recruiter lied to me 3 ways from Sunday. Now, I was smart enough to get everything in writing because I knew, like I said, I'm a generational military brat. But I took comfort in knowing he's in the brig and I'm out free because he got caught. He enlisted a prior service Marine into the Army while he was going to do whatever training they had on the new MOS because they didn't transition him into the Army from whatever his Marine MOS was, and I don't know the whole story. Mm-hmm. But while he was on deployment, he was having relations with this man's wife and daughter separately. He got away with it till they talked to each other, and then mom and daughter find out they're sleeping with the same guy and it's him. And so that's when they finally reported it. And so he got in trouble because not only is it like conduct unbecoming, it's really bad look if the recruiter's sleeping and playing Jody while you're gone. Makes it really hard for other recruiters.
That's wild, dude.
Yeah, I heard about that when I got back from boot camp, and I'm like, couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
I don't see like how that might be like some old generation recruiters because like our like recruiters were like playing video games when I needed to ask them questions about like contracts and stuff. Like I never had a recruiter that involved in my life other than like making me lose weight by any means necessary and just making sure I still wanted to go.
I was talking to recruiters in 97 because like I said, I went to boot camp in 98.
Right.
So it was a little bit of a different world. I mean, in 98, when I enlisted, the CNN did a special that world peace might finally be attainable. Jokes on them. And it was definitely different. Although the Marines back then, it was pretty intense in the pre boot camp stuff. They did the Pooley stuff where they were doing all the PT and
they still do that now.
So that seems way more involved than what the Army had me do. They're just like, practice and study hard for your drug test.
Well, they changed it now. So it used to be if you wanted to join the Marine Corps and like you were serious about it, you spoke to a recruiter, everything, you could sign a waiver and you could PT with the Poolies. They changed it right before I went to where you had to be a Poolie, you had to be depped in, go to MEPS, all that stuff, and contract in order to like PT with the group.
Because if you got hurt, it could.
Yeah, if you got hurt, it was on the you know, HQMC, and you know, most of them are teenagers, and teenagers do dumb things.
Absolutely.
So, you know, they didn't want to be the one holding the bag at the end of the day.
And if they get hurt as poolies, or the Army had a program too, if for the fat bodies that were close, and it was the same issue. Like if they got hurt doing that, it's murky gray area. Do they qualify for disability at that point because they got hurt as part of the process?
Yeah,
and I get why. The Army solution was to if you were close, they'd send you to that same sort of fat camp program, but they do it at the MEP station or at the AG station at the boot camp location.
So I get why the Marine Corps did it, because I was a fat body, you know, and I maintained weight and everything else. I was never on like BCP or anything like that, like while I was in. But I was a fat body leading up to the Marine Corps, got out, and now I'm a fat body now. But it doesn't matter because, you know, I've done my time. But it's an ingenious thing on the Marine Corps' part, because everyone else is going to say no. So I was like 290, 300 pounds, and I wanted to go. And Army was like, you know, you're 6'2", you gotta be 200 for us to contract you. You know, come back then. Navy, same thing. Air Force, same thing. Coast Guard wouldn't return my calls. Marine Corps recruiter was like, hey, bro, you only gotta be 240 for us to contract you. Come work out with us. And by the time that I had lost that weight, which was like 8 months, something like that, I lost like 40 pounds in like a month and a half, and it wasn't healthy at all. But by the time like I lost that weight, I had already like been indoctrinated. It was like Stockholm syndrome. I was already like about that like Marine Corps life. So like I didn't want to go anywhere else. And so I kind of get like why they wanted to do it that way, because, you know, you hang around them long enough, you kind of just like vibe with them, and you want to do it. And then, you know, looking back, I'm like, yep, that they got my ass. That's how they got me.
Yeah, the running joke was with the Army, they'd get you with the Red Lobster or the Applebee's or whatever, because the recruiters would use their whatever card to talk to you over a meal. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they would find someone just so they could justify paying for their own meal.
That's funny.
But it was definitely an interesting experience. I know it's totally different than the way they do it now. But I shouldn't have been able to enlist. I was too fat when I got to boot camp. When I went to the MEP station, the guy that was the MD at the Richmond MEPs was he had served in World War II with my grandfather. Mm-hmm. And so I look enough like him that I was like, oh, I know your grandpa. And so he just kind of fudged the numbers. And then, of course, you get to Fort Benning and you are the fat body, and they could have sent me to the fat platoon. They could have sent me home. Instead, I became their project. So I was road guard the entire, 13, 14 weeks. I can't remember how long boot camp was. It's been over 20 years. But yeah, I was road guard the entire time. I grew 3 inches in height and lost almost 100 pounds that summer. Enough that my mom didn't recognize me at graduation. She just looked for white dudes with glasses in the right platoon. That's how she narrowed it down.
So I started my Marine Corps journey, my military journey at like 292, 297, something like that, right? When I went to boot camp, I weighed 218 or 212. I can't really remember. When I got out of boot camp, I weighed 187. So I looked like, you know, heroin chic. Like I would have been on Vogue in like 2001. Like I look great for that time. But my entire time in, I maintained 208. That was my target weight that I had to hit, and I was either like at that weight every time I had to weigh in, or I was like a pound less. And then when I got out, because I had lost my weight like so drastically, like I worked out a lot, but like over like when I was a poolee, when I was in depth, excuse me, I was working out twice a day, doing like nothing but like cardio or like HIIT training. And then I was only eating like 1,200, 1,000 calories a day, and I was taking laxatives like they were candy. Like I was taking like 12, 16 laxatives a day. So like,
good.
no, like looking back, and my fiance pointed out, I had an eating disorder. Like I was bulimic, but just terribly. Like that's what I was. And when I got out, because a lot of what I was like losing was like, water weight. Like I quickly like put my weight back on, but thankfully the muscle tone and everything that I had done for like the past 4 years while I was in the Marine Corps, like I carry my weight better now to where like I'm probably only like 10, 15 pounds less than what I weighed when I was like 21. And I know for a fact I don't look it, and I look better, and my weight is carried better now than it did back when I was technically speaking in my prime.
Yeah, I've been doing that the whole weight loss journey too, because I ran into because we did convoy escorts, like we did fob jumping the entire year I was in for both years I was there. And then the second year we did a lot of support for the Marines in the Sunni Triangle. So we were the ones bringing supplies to the Marines at 2nd Fallujah, and then up to the run from there to Mosul. And so I ran into one of the Marines that we had worked with, because he was the liaison that was in charge of coordinating getting all the stuff we took to them to the units in Fallujah. And I ran into him just randomly, and he goes, "Damn, Handley, you got fat. I know 5 fat people, and you're 4 of them." And I'm like, "Well, shit, now it's time to lose weight."
Yeah, that'll happen. Like, I can remember, like, I had sergeants, like, I was probably in the best shape of my life, dude. And, like, we had sergeants, like, if you don't have an 8-pack, you're fat. And, like, I could do, like, 13 dead hang pull-ups, which, I mean, like, that's not a lot, but, like, that's more than, like, what most Americans can do. And, like, I could run, 3 miles in, like, 23 minutes. Like, I was in shape, but, like, I wasn't aesthetically pleasing, as you want to say.
My superpower was that I could run and sweat 90 proof alcohol for PT runs after all night partying with the dudes.
Hell no. Screw that.
We were the most physically fit alcoholics the world had ever seen.
I knew a dude who would smoke a cigarette and then he would run a 15-minute 3 mile. So
that's insane.
Yeah, and I asked him, like, what's wrong with him? He's like, I don't know. I just, like to run for fun. Which, as a Marine, that people like don't understand that. I got that feeling about this dude because I don't understand anybody who runs for fun. The only time I will ever run is if I'm in danger or someone else is. I'm not running for fun.
I did cross country for fun, and I get it. I don't anymore, not since I got hurt. I go for daily walks now, and have started working out at the gym. Although, given how annoying gym people are, and some of this modern, everyone wants to take selfies instead of just work out. I'm thinking about just getting a home gym so I don't have to deal with people. But like I did cross country, so I could think, like it would clear my head and like I could process stuff. So I get it to a point, but cross country and sprinting are a lot different. That's just endurance and the willingness to deal with the suck.
Yeah,
that's a whole different mindset. I think when I ran cross country in high school, we had the one of the shirts we had was something like any idiot can run 100 meters. It's the next 3,900 that count. And I don't know how many meters are in a 5K, but that was the general math.
Yeah.
And so I get the running, like it clears your head, the endorphins. But for me, it was the long distance because and it was doing it in nature. Like I didn't like running in the suburbs just to run because that's not cool. Like but running the trails, that was something else.
I always hated, like, I didn't mind doing like burst sprints. So like Marine Corps, we have 2 different physical fitness tests, right? So we take 2 physical fitness tests a year. One is a PFT, and it goes from like January through June, and the other one's a CFT, so it goes July through December. And PFT is at least back when I was in, it was pull-ups, crunches, which they changed it now to a plank, and then a 3-mile run. And then you do that in green on green. So we would have like our T-shirt, and then like our '80s era athletic shorts that the Marine Corps still keeps, our silkies, and CFT is done in boots and utes. So, just like your trousers, your boots, and then your skivvy shirt. And that is I think 880 is 2 laps around the track, right?
Well, every track's gonna be a little different, but
oh yeah, so it's like a half mile, right? So it's a half mile sprint, and then it is ammo can lifts, and then what's called like a maneuver under fire, which is like 100-yard like obstacle course. You have to low crawl, high crawl, like serpentine through cones.
Yeah, we did those. We just called those obstacle courses. I don't think it was anything more than that.
Oh yeah, we got graded for time on that. But like the point is like
we did too. We just called them obstacle courses. Although you have one you specifically call an obstacle course that's a little different.
Yes, yeah. So that one is like there's actually like the maneuver under fire, there's not like setup for it, and there's not any. The only thing that's there is like a bunch of cones and a dummy grenade. And like you just have to serpentine into the cones, and then you have to run up, throw the dummy grenade into like this little square. If it goes in, you get 5 seconds off your time. If you miss, it adds 5 seconds to your time. And then you have to do like a buddy drag into a buddy carry and everything else. But like our obstacle course, like there are actual obstacles. Like it's you have like a bunch of logs that you have to like maneuver over. There's like a rope climb, there's a balance beam, there's all these other things. But we never got graded on those.
So our obstacle course was the monkey bars. We had to crawl under concertina wire, go under like a concrete tube. Some of it had water that you're trying to go under. Though I don't know that was intentional. More like it was, low point that just water naturally collected. We had to drag an ammo can as we low crawled, and there was a part where you would high crawl. We did have the pillbox, which is what you're talking about. We were trying to get the grenade on target as the last thing, although they didn't really add or subtract time. It's just you did it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just sweating to the oldies. So
yeah.
All right. Before we get too distracted, because I do enjoy talking with other veterans, we do have to do the religion questions. So are you ready for this, sir?
I am.
All right. Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Star Wars.
Okay. What is it about Star Wars that you dig?
Star Wars was like my introduction into like sci-fi. It's the very first sci-fi movie I ever watched was A New Hope when I was like 6. And it's like one of those like few nerd things that I can like really nerd out about, and like I can like discuss like the politics and everything else, even like to some extent into like the extended universe. Never seen Firefly, never seen Star Trek.
Okay. I do think you should broaden your horizons, but Star Wars is good. It feels lived in. I dig it. All right. So because we are polytheistic here at the Blashes and Blades podcast, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia?
That is a good question. It depends on the media we're talking about. So if we're talking about like visual media, I would say Chronicles of Narnia.
Okay.
Because Game of Thrones kind of shit the bed.
The ending that was nothing.
The ending that was nothing, indeed. And if we're talking like red media, it would probably be Game of Thrones. Again, this is because I haven't read Wheel of Time.
Okay. So one of the crying shames of adulthood is we do stop asking each other the important questions. So we do like to bring it back thanks to some of our sponsors. And we're going to ask you, sir, what is your favorite dinosaur?
That would be a Triceratops.
Okay. Why is that your favorite dinosaur?
I don't feel like they get their flowers enough. Everyone knows the T-Rex or the Brontosaurus or the Stegosaurus. No one really talks about the Triceratops enough. And, I am a defender for them, and I'll die on that hill.
Okay. So did you grow up watching? Was it like Land Before Time and all that?
I saw like one or two of the movies, but I did have like a little like dinosaur fascination when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And the T-Rex always scared me. And the Brontosaurus, like they kind of didn't really look like they did anything. Originally, I would say Stegosaurus, but they're not even in the same time. So we got to go with the Triceratops, and they're the kind of ones that I kind of went with and stuck with.
Okay. And since we try to be civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, we are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. So, coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
I will take Colombian coffee with a good helping of the Coffee Mate sweet cream.
Why Colombian?
It's like the only like one that like we have like a Keurig here, and we tried like a bunch of different like K-cups, and the Colombian's one's always the ones like I've gravitated towards. We're talking like fresh coffee because I've tried it before. Kopi Luwak, like that. It's I don't know how to explain it in a way that doesn't sound weird, but these lemurs eat the coffee beans and then they digest them, and the coffee itself is harvested from lemur droppings somehow. And it is perfectly fine to drink because I'm tired of like people like raising their eyebrow at it. It's perfectly fine to drink. It's like stupid expensive. It's like $100 for like 12 ounces or something like that. And because I was with a bunch of Marines, we all pitched in and we tried it one time, and we drank it black, and that is the only coffee I will drink black.
There's another one like that that's actually pandas eat it, excrete it, and then they harvest the beans that way. And so that's not the only one that's like that.
Okay.
I think I prefer medium roast, generally speaking, but I brew it extra strong so that way when I add like the cream and sugar, or just in my case now milk and sugar-free flavor syrups, but when I add that, I want to still taste the coffee. So I brew it extra strong, which doesn't mean I go through more coffee. I break the number one rule of drug dealing, and I use my own supply. So like I actually use my discount code to buy the coffee brand coffee because I really dig it.
Yeah.
Although I've been looking at maybe getting back into not just the K-cups, but doing like a traditional roast, or maybe going back to a French roast, or not a French press. There we go.
French press. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know this, but apparently the lighter the roast, the more caffeine content in the coffee.
I did not know that. That's new.
I like some dude at work told it to me, and he's an old guy, old Navy dude, so I'm kind of like conditioned to believe him. Could be completely wrong, and I'm spreading misinformation, but you heard it here first.
One thing I won't do is the decaf coffee. I was
you might as well not drink coffee at that point if you're going to drink decaf.
Well, so the reason I won't do is because the process to make it. So I was a barista to pay for grad school, and when I realized my on-campus job ended when the school year ended, so I had to get a different job. I just transferred from that coffee shop to Starbucks, and I ended up going through their Black Apron program, which was like a coffee master program. I don't even know if they still do it. I don't shop at Starbucks anymore. They're way too expensive. But one of the things you learn is how they make decaf is they actually bleach the beans, and then they add artificial and that's how they get most of the caffeine out. Not all of it, just most. So if you're really allergic to caffeine, you can't have any of it. So people that tell you I'm allergic, no, you're not, or you wouldn't drink this. But then they dye it to get the color, because now the beans are all gray. So then they have to add food coloring to get them to look like coffee beans again. And I'm just like, that can't be good for you.
That's too much. That's too much work. Just don't drink coffee at that point. Just
but no, the bleaching process to get the grains out, like they're using chemical washers on it.
Yeah, no, like,
and so they'll tell you it's safe, but I'm just not convinced.
I don't buy it.
So, although I really did dig the name of the coffee shop I worked at when I was at Nova. So Villanova is on a functioning monastery. Okay. And so the name of their coffee shop was the Holy Grounds Cafe.
That's awesome.
It was just so punny that I had to dig it. It was dad jokes before I was even a dad.
Yeah, they had to train you early. That's
right. And the brothers would come in whenever they weren't doing whatever the monks did, and we'd sit and have interesting conversations about philosophy and stuff while high on caffeine. It was glorious. I miss those days.
That's amazing.
That was before the war and the head injury. I don't know that I could keep up anymore, but it was fun while it lasted. So we mentioned that you served in the Marine Corps. You were a comms guy in the Corps. Does your time, you think, in the Marine Corps affect the way you tell stories?
I think it affects the way that I create characters.
Okay.
So I feel like, particularly with like military stories or military sci-fi or anything, there's a certain way that I approach writing characters that are militaristic or from a military background, and like writing very blunt characters who have a kind of like a dark sense of humor, a twisted sense of humor, because regardless across all branches, we can kind of all resonate with that. I write my characters impatient because everyone's been told to hurry up and wait before for no good reason. The characters have a dark sense of humor because like that's how all of us became friends, because there was nothing really else to do, and we were going through like a bunch of stuff at the time, and like a bunch of whether you want to call it traumatic or what, like you have to like use something to kind of like keep your brain off of like the ways you're thinking about it. And so we all kind of have like that dark sense of humor that comes out every once in a while. And maybe it's just because everyone that I know is very blunt and very plain in the way they speak, and they don't really tiptoe around the way they write or the way they talk to people. That's how I write the characters, because that's how I envision them. And I feel like that kind of comes off a lot more realistic in tone and for readers to kind of grasp onto. One of the things I do kind of pride myself on is my ability to kind of make realistic characters, or real enough in a sense. And so I think that, particularly speaking with this type of work or this particular project, it came off very natural to me.
Do you draw on people that you knew while you served when you're writing these characters?
A little bit here, a little bit there. I would say it's about 40% inspiration, 60%, things from my own imagination.
Okay. So obviously, like, you write characters based on your experience in the military, and that affects that. Has your time in the Marine Corps affected the way you engage with content as a consumer? Because obviously, if you're a writer, you also like to read and watch the things.
Yeah, I think that like when I engage with content, like anything that's military related, I do appreciate when they take like time to like do their research about things, or when they take time to just get like the little minor details right. A lot of my like free time, like if I'm watching something that is military related, it's usually like a documentary, or it's like a retelling of what happened. And I love hearing about that, because especially like in the time that I served, a lot of it was like peacetime. It was a lot spent in garrison time and prepping for something to happen, or supporting people that wasn't the Marine Corps, or just like DoD in general, who were already doing things that like were happening. And so to look back on how far we've come and to see like, like my uncles, my grandfather, my grandfather, all the shit that they had to go through to where we are now, it's very interesting to see and something that I enjoy doing and enjoy consuming.
Okay. So do you write your characters then to be veterans like you are, or are they, you make them, a lot of them are Marines?
No. I write my characters to, I would say that, maybe some of them would like support the Marines. Like, I think like in Hounds of Orion, like Logan probably could have been a Marine because that's kind of like how his personality tends to. I'm writing another story right now where the main character is a former Navy corpsman. And, Greenside Docks, because the Marine Corps doesn't have a medical field, like they're just smarter Marines. But they still kind of have like that distinction in like how they, approach things that's still different from Marines. I don't really think that I could write a story that was 100% faithful to the Marines, because I feel like that's just something that if you're not there to experience it, it kind of comes off as like either fantastical or terrifying, depending on who you are.
That's why I like to write the everyman, because I think it's more relatable. If you write the special squirrels, like I worked with some of them, not because I was actually doing missions, but just we'd run into each other when I was escorting convoys. And one thing, or we're doing an accordion in search, where the cordon, while they go do the house to house, mostly means we're just sitting there bored, twiddling our thumbs. Mm-hmm. But like they're like well-oiled machines when they do it right. And so if you write that true to form, it's boring.
Yeah,
like, it's like watching robots do their thing. And so if you want character, you almost have to write the drafty, the militia guy that's pulled into service kind of thing. So and this is the last question before we air the commercial and go into start talking about the book itself, but how did you go from being a nerd who likes to read and play the games and watch the movies to deciding you were going to tell your own stories?
I had to thank my fiance for that one. I play Dungeons and Dragons a lot. I didn't play, I was a DM for like 10 years. And we were texting one day, and I had showed her this thing that I wrote for a campaign. And she's a very big, literary snob. And she messaged me back and she says, hey, did you write this? Like, did you make this up? I'm like, yeah, I made it up. And she's like, this is really good. You should write it. I'm like, no. And she kept telling me, she's like, I think you could really do something with it. And, one day I kind of just said, screw it. And I sat down, gave it a try. And here we are now.
Okay. All right. Well, then we are going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly show for the man. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the Hounds of Orion series.
They picked a fight with the wrong species. A nation at war, the United Stars of America, born in the conflagration of an unprovoked alien attack, the newest entrant to galactic politics took the few crumbs of hypertech gifted to it and ran with them, soon expanding over dozens of star systems and establishing a wide trade network, protected by its powerful navy and the dreaded warp marines. In a fight to the death, a single marine platoon tasked with protecting an embassy on a hostile alien planet, an embassy and the fragile human enclave around it, that soon finds itself surrounded by armed mobs, Can the Marines and a ragtag band of civilian and Navy personnel survive long enough to be rescued?
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. And with that out of the way, we're going to transition to talking about the Hound of Orion, Hounds, excuse me, plural, that you wrote, Rook. And so first, while I throw that cover up, which I really dig, if someone was, hey, is this appropriate for my kid? And we're going to use the movie theater rating. How would you rate this book?
If we're going by the movie theater rating system, it's probably definitely an R rating just for language alone. It took it out, probably PG-13. But reading it straight, I would say, soft R rating.
Okay. You can take the man out of the barracks, but not the barracks out of your mouth.
Exactly.
Yeah, I have to catch myself on that one too. So I definitely feel you. Okay. So could you give us the elevator pitch on what the Hounds of Orion is?
Yeah. So this takes place 800 years in the future. Humanity has left Earth and has colonized the rest of the galaxy. There's two factions. You have EarthGov, you have Free Space. EarthGov is, of course, ran by Earth, and they control a majority of the planets. Free Space is a part of space that is controlled by corporations. And now the main fighting force of both are arms units, or armored robotic mechanized skeletons. And this story in particular, we follow Cameron Pellin, who is a planetary prince put into a situation where he has to leave that planet and go and find his fortune out in free space. And the best way to do that is by being threaded inside of a mech.
Okay, so what genre is this? Because it almost gives me like a lit RPG vibe for the concept.
It is a progression sci-fi. Okay. I think there's two status screens total, right? In the book itself. But there is progression in how the hierarchy of the arms system kind of works, in which the theory behind it is they didn't want someone with a lot of money coming in, buying the most expensive mech, buying all the upgrades they could afford, and not knowing how to pilot it, because now they're not only a danger to themselves, they are also a danger to others. So the progression, in a sense, is different types of upgrades and things that you can add to your mech. So there's 5 ranks. It goes alpha, beta, gamma, sigma, and omega, and which within those ranks there are 3 sub ranks for each, and it's Logos, Sirius, and Primus. And we would say, in terms of like power scaling, power progression, alpha class mechs can go like 150 miles an hour, and they're just giant, super fast tanks. And once you get up to Omega class, it's not so much they're going like really fast as much as they're like ripping holes in reality to jump onto the other side. And the best way I put it is, one of the characters said that they saw 2 Omega class pilots fight one time, but they didn't actually see them. They just heard 1 minute they were there, and then they heard a series of sonic booms continuously for like 30 seconds until one of them was a smoldering heap of slag on the ground. So that's kind of like the distinction in how we get into there, and how you kind of like, what was that?
So you said there are 3 subclasses per your 4 degrees of mech. Is that sort of like the degrees of a belt for martial arts?
I mean, yeah, probably kind of like if you're within like a place that has like you have like a red belt, and then you have a red belt with like a black stripe.
Right.
And then once you have that red belt with a black stripe, then you can go into the black. Like, yeah, it would kind of work like that, right? So like you would you would have a white belt, then you would have a white belt with one stripe, then two stripe, then three stripes, and then you can go onto the yellow, and that's how it works. And how that is done is based on combat data that is analyzed, that is stored in a central repository and a central registry for all registered arms units. It is by how many missions you take or how many contracts you take as a pilot, and the difficulty of said missions / how successful they were as a pilot. And that is where you kind of get your rating based on how these things work.
Okay. So is it a spoiler to say why the former prince has to go on the lam?
He is framed for something he didn't do. I mean, it's a popular enough trope that I don't feel like it's too spoilery.
Okay. So is he the main character? Is it first person, third person? Are there other players that we get to meet? Or
it is, yeah. Yeah, so it is third person. I would say that there are two main characters. There is Cameron, and then there is Logan, who is the mentor character. Former captain of the guard for Ketris, left about a decade ago to go seek his fortune in free space, and he got called back to train Cameron up how to actually be a pilot.
Okay. So what was the origin of this story? Like, where did you get the idea that became the Hounds of Orion?
It's a combination of Mobile Fighter G Gundam, the one where they don't pilot it normally. They get inside and it like covers their body in like a latex suit, and like it does everything that they do. And it's that, and then it's like Warhammer 40K. I like the idea of, these things, mechs look like people. At least in like everything that's like popular, mechs look like giant humanoids with swords or lasers or whatever. But the fact that you would still pilot them like you would like an aircraft didn't really make sense to me. So I wanted to kind of take on a route of like, okay, well, what if we made a thing where it's like, okay, it's a 1-to-1 thing. But the latex bodysuit seemed really silly. So I took some inspiration from, how barbaric and grimdark Warhammer 40K could, and you get threaded pilots. And threads are like, you take a screw hole and then you graft it onto a human skeleton. There is 16 in total, 3 on each arm, 3 on each leg, 3 going down the spine, and then 1 neural uplink at the base of the brain. And you enter the mech from the back. The back hatch closes, and you are literally screwed inside of this mech. And so whatever you do, the mech will replicate. And there's other things we get into, like the cockpit would probably be at like the chest area. And you'll notice there's no viewport, and that is where the neural uplink comes into place, because it will snake down, and there will be another spike that goes into the neural uplink. And now, instead of like looking at like a piece of metal in front of them, they are now looking through the eyes of the mech from that perspective. There's something called Fizzolite, which it's just like a rod made of light, but it is like, it mimics like the mech's hands clutching onto something. So if he's holding like the handle of a sword, In that pilot's same hand, there's a rod of like orange light. And yeah, just different things like that. Most of them use melee weapons because there's only so many ways I can write gun go bang before it just loses all meaning. And yeah.
So if he's screwed directly into the suit, that means if something gets damaged on the suit, he potentially could get injured as well.
Yeah, that's another part of the neuro uplink is there's like a haptic feedback system where whatever happens on the suit he feels. So let's say the right arm gets cut off, his arm's not gone, but it just goes like stone cold numb to kind of simulate like, oh, we can't use this anymore.
I was more thinking of like if like an EMP scrambles the thing, it could scramble his brain kind of thing.
Yeah. EMPs are considered a war crime in this universe because how it works is both controlling forces of the galaxy, Free Space and EarthGov, they take different processes, monopolies in arms construction. So EarthGov creates the AIs and the BIs because there are artificial intelligences or virtual intelligences that act as co-pilots on here. They are the ones that handle all like the little background stuff like diagnostics, fluid levels, things like that. They also provide like battlefield data and are generally just like an encyclopedia. Free Space handles the construction of the arms themselves because they can mass produce these things. And because they mass produce them, sometimes things get cut out. In this case, it would be a fail-safe system because it was deemed too bulky for that. In order to ship more units and get more things out, they just, went to EarthGov and say, hey, this is the only thing that this is preventing, which is an EMP. Let's just make these illegal. They said yes, they agreed. They're good to go. But if you get your hands on an EMP and you shoot it and it hits a mech, it kills the intelligence on board, which is also the one that is maintaining the life support systems. And then the mech will go into shutdown sequence. And what it does is it tries to compress itself as much as it possibly can. Because they wanted to ship as many of these things in the containers as they could. So they made sure it was a feature that the cockpit can enclose in on itself and it can make itself smaller. So if you shot an arms unit with an EMP, the pilot would die, but they wouldn't die the traditional way. They would just get crushed to death.
That would be a bloody mess for someone to clean.
It would.
So what can you tell us about the main character other than, he joins because he's fleeing a fraudulent accusation? What can you tell us about him as a person?
He is a petulant child. It's one of those I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but I don't want to have to do the job that got me that silver spoon in the first place. And that's how he's written here. And down the line in the later books, he does grow up and has a point, but where he matures and becomes like, a character that you don't dislike. And I wouldn't even say here that you dislike him all the time, but there are instances where you can kind of see his childishness come through. He doesn't, how it works is every planet though it is governed by an EarthGov representative who governs that sector, they've set up little like nobility things on each of these planets that don't have gendered succession. It's just whoever's born first. So he is the second born of the royal family. His sister's firstborn. So his sister is actually going to be crowned empress of her planet. He is to take on the role of seneschal, which here is the general of their planet's forces. And he doesn't want to do that. He's a hard partying kid, likes to chase liquor and skirts in equal measure. And he's forced to grow up very quickly, thanks to the help of our other main character, but also just the situation that he finds himself in.
Do we find out who set him up, or is that a spoiler?
Oh, no, you're going to find out who set him up, like, when the setup happens.
Okay. My gut says it's probably the sister to get him out of the way, so there's no spare air.
You'll just have to read it and find out. You might be disappointed.
That is an excellently authorly answer, so well done, sir.
Thank you.
So what can you tell us about the secondary character, the one that trains him?
Logan, he is he has a lot of personal demons that he's going through, and a lot of trauma that he's running from, and is also one of those people that doesn't believe that trauma is a real thing. The one thing he believes in is his own abilities and how he's kept himself alive so far has altered his outlook in a way to be very hard on the exterior, but he does have a good heart, and he does understand the importance of family and the importance of tradition and what is asked of people. He just because he would come on him and Cameron kind of butt heads at the beginning of it, where Cameron thinks he's an asshole because of how he is, and Logan thinks Cameron's an asshole because he's balking at a job that many people would love to do. But over time, they kind of have this, it goes from like this student mentor relationship to almost kind of like a pseudo father figure relationship. That it does get tested sometimes, and continues to later on. But he was like the driving force that Cameron would need, and apparently, according to some of my female readers, a very good book boyfriend, whatever that means.
You could ask, but you're probably not ready for that answer.
I'm really not.
There's a dark side of TikTok and YouTube Shorts for all the people that get really addicted to their books.
Yeah.
It's a weird world out there. But hey, there's room for everybody.
Yeah, I don't judge. I'm just glad I wrote a character that could be considered a book boyfriend. That's high praise.
Yeah, I guess. So with the story, you said it's progression, sci-fi adventure story.
Yeah.
Are these arms units, these giant mechanized suits, part of a proper military? Or are they more like gladiators duking it out in an arena?
It depends, and it depends on who's piloting them. On a lot of planets, the further you get away from Earth and the further you get away from EarthGov's reach, a lot of planets will have an army of what's called squires. They're kind of like arms units, except they lack a head. and they are piloted how most people would think you would pilot a mech, with like having like an actual cockpit and like, you know, yoke controls and everything else like that. What usually ends up happening is arms units will the pilots will end up usually joining what I'm calling GACs or GACs, which are galactic arms companies. And they tend to kind of like fill the role as like guilds from like a fantasy story. And it just kind of depends on what they do. Some GACs, all they will do is take contracts for warfare, putting down rebellions or insurrections, or even helping to invade or destroy a planet. Some will function as peacekeepers for an entire sector. And it's kind of just like the nature of the job. This has been a society that is propped up under the idea of mercenary or contract work. You know, later on in the next couple of books, you know, there are, you know, you meet characters like, you know, a husband and wife that work for rival GACs that have met on a battlefield. And, you know, it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, well, I won't attack your guys, you don't attack mine, or I won't attack your team, you don't attack mine. And they kind of like, you know, play it off like that. But it's something that's like ingrained of like, it is what it is type culture. But this is something that needs to be done. No one else really wants to do it. And they're paying really, really well. So why not try it?
Okay, so very mercenary culture. You mentioned that this the series isn't done, that you've got more books coming out. So where do you foresee this series going? Is it going to stop at a trilogy? Is it going to be an ongoing series? Do you have an end point in mind?
I think so. We have this initial trilogy right here. So we're on Hounds of Orion book 1 right now. I'm working on book 2, which is called Ghosts of Ketris. And then we'll go into book 3, and that would be the Cameron trilogy. I have 3 more books that's planned about Cameron and the rest of the crew that we meet along the way, where they get into something that's a little bit more galactic, important, you know, like widespread in terms of importance, not just based on, you know, one dude and whatever's going on at his planet. And then I have one spin-off novel that is going to wrap everything up in a nice, neat little bow, and we'll probably call it there.
So with this this universe, do you expect do you have it planned out as far as it goes, or are some of the plots kind of surprising to you? Like, what for your writing process, I guess, do you outline it meticulously so you know where everything's going, or do you give yourself like room to be inspired in the middle?
Yeah, I know the beginning and the end. I know a little bit about the middle, and then everything else in between we'll figure out as the chapters come.
Okay. Now, you originally released book 1 on Royal Road, which I linked to your Royal Road profile as well in the show notes. Do you intend to keep using that platform, or are you going to move now that you've got a contract with Shadowlight Press?
I'll probably do the first 3. I'll probably do the Cameron trilogy on Royal Road. I've been wrapped up in a bunch of projects right now, and unlike my colleagues, I cannot write fast. So I've been kind of just putting my backlog out there right now for book 2. And then I'll probably pick that up here like in another week or 2. We're about 79 or 80,000 words in the book 2. So we have about 40,000 more to go. and then book 3 will come out. Once that is done, I'll probably just release the other 4 as they're written. I'm not really a big Royal Road fan after going through with it, just because like there's a lot of genres that are underserved on the platform, or just doesn't get like enough attention. And I think instead of worrying about what is going to draw eyes on a site that is primarily for lit RPG or progression fantasy or things like that, which is completely fine. I'm not blaming the site at all. This is my fault for putting it out there. I'll probably just, focus on writing a good story.
Okay, that makes sense. I know a lot of authors have pulled away from Royal Road more because they're not as robust in defending plagiarism issues. Of course, that's been a while since I've heard that. I haven't followed up to know if they've ever fixed that, and they might have. But I know some people don't like it because it's normally kids reading it there who aren't going to buy your book, so you're not serving your professional market if you're writing there.
There is some truth to that, and for anyone who reads or writes or everything, like if you want to, if you enjoy reading progression fantasy and lit RPG and wuxia and cultivation stories, then Royal Road is an amazing place for you. But if you are a writer and you want to put your stuff on there, you need to understand that they are spoiled for choice in terms of what they want to read. So oftentimes, if you write something that you think is, this would be a great idea, or I really think this is really unique and creative, it by all means would be. But if they don't like it or it doesn't gel with what they're expecting, then you could lose a reader or get a 0.5 star review, and you're just suddenly not getting a lot of more visibility, and it can create a kind of loop of the idea of, are these the people that I want to write to that wouldn't buy the book, or the fans that do enjoy the book for what it is? And it's just kind of how you want to go about it.
Is Shadowlight Press going to be putting them out in audiobook as well?
Yes. So Shadowlight, we have a recording. Book 1 is being recorded right now. Should be finished being mastered here in the next few weeks, and we will have it out probably towards the end of June or July, I think. Don't quote me on it. I'll let you know.
If this if it comes out in audio, you can share it in the Facebook group or our Discord, whichever one.
That'd be great.
And that way people can check it out.
That'd be good. That'd be amazing. Love to do that.
So you've talked about you've talked about the good guys. Is there anything you could tell us about the antagonist, the big bad that they have to deal with in book 1 without it being spoilers?
Yeah. So the big bad thinks that he is more big and bad than what he actually is. And while his plans do get put into motion, you are going to meet characters along the way that either work for the big bad or the big bad has reached out to, that are going to shine a light on just how, not depraved, but just like how far someone's willing to go for money. And that and those guys aren't even really the main antagonists here. They are secondary, but they do kind of shine a light on the part of like, oh, what have I done type thing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So with that being said, is the world itself, because some stories are man versus environment, is the world itself dangerous just to be in, or have we tamed the various planets where humanity rests?
We've tamed a lot of where humanity is right now. It is definitely more so man versus man, or man versus government, or it's a lot of human conflict that probably doesn't really need to be conflict, but they have a particular way of thinking, and if they think that, oh, I can just solve this with, a squad of arms, why take the chance?
So this is one of those why have a staff meeting when a email would have served the purpose kind of vibe.
Exactly, but an email is a 30-foot tall mech with a sword the size of a city bus.
So did you get swords to play with just as a tax write-off so you could write the sword scenes?
I wanted to. How I write fight scenes, I listen to music, particularly music that has really good like rhythm and bass. So like metalcore, new metal, gangster rap, dubstep, and I listen to it on repeat, and I choreograph fight scenes in my head. And if it's gotten to a point now where if I listen to a song that's like not, if I'm not in the mood for like easy listening or whatever else, and like I listen to like a metal song or I listen to like a hip hop song, if I can't choreograph a fight scene to it in my head, I don't like that song. I won't listen to it. Not even like when I'm not even like writing or anything. I just hate it.
Okay. Would you live in this world if you could?
Yeah, I would. I think for the average person, it is fairly safe and fairly it's fairly safe, fairly benign. I think the only time it really becomes dangerous for somebody is if you try to poke the bear will poke back. And if you are a bear poker, you're probably going to have a bad time.
That sounds like an insult in some fantasy world. You bear poker.
For sure.
So when it comes to the culture in this universe, and I'm kind of getting towards the end because I realize obviously we don't do spoilers here, but when it comes to the culture of this universe, like Earth still exists, they're still in touch with Earth. So did the cultures that are predominant on Earth that we modern readers would understand, did they still exist, or did you create whole new cultures as some idea that things would merge and drift in the future?
I would say that they certainly still exist. Like you meet characters from Earth that that have like accents of places that you would believe would be from where they were. That being said, a lot of reverence is given to Earth from EarthGov controlled worlds. Like they call it the mother planet. You have kings and queens and emperors and empresses who will, bow and throw great fanfare if a sector ambassador visits. Like it shuts everything down. The way the big bad goes about doing his thing is because they know that they have to do it a certain way, because if they don't, then an EarthGov ambassador could be harmed, and the only type of pilots that EarthGov employs are all Omega class. If you would take, a million pilots are in the entire galaxy, which is not a lot, but maybe 5%, 10% of those are Omega class pilots, and 90% of them work for EarthGov. So they kind of have like a big beat stick.
Does that mean the sector planets are kind of like the Bush Leagues for EarthGov?
It can be. They're more Bush Leagues for free space. I would say.
I mean, if you're saying they only take the top tier pilots, you obviously don't start off that way. So there's got to be some sort of training pipeline.
Yeah. So they would have like we haven't really got eyes on Earth as this point in the story. But if I had to make something up on the spot, I would say that there's probably they're turning these old officer training schools on Earth into pilot training schools. And yeah, they would scout from planets around, or even free space pilots. And they could say, hey, you could contract with us, or we can finagle some way of granting you your citizenship to EarthGov, so you no longer have to jump through a bunch of hoops to operate in EarthGov controlled space. Come work for us. And that's where you would get it a lot. By and large, though EarthGov has the vast majority of Omega class pilots, the top tier of those Omega class pilots would be are all free space, because at the end of the day, no one really wants to mess with EarthGov, but free space has wars popping up all over all the time. So they are top tier in the way of like they just constantly stay honing their craft.
Okay. Is there anything about the Hounds of Orion universe that we didn't ask that you think the reader needs to know?
There is a distinct difference between artificial intelligence and virtual intelligence. It is hinted at and mentioned, focused on in like the last part of the book, but it is very much expounded upon later. I would like for the readers to keep that in mind as they kind of go through this.
Okay. So this is the part of the interview, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right book. So do your part. It really does make a difference, especially for new authors and small presses. That really does make a difference for them, for visibility and for the algorithms. They're kind of swimming upstream without a paddle, as they were. I'm probably butchering that analogy or that idiom, but I'm trying not to cuss as much, people. So you got to give me some space to learn new ones. Okay. So with that, how can listeners and viewers, if they wanted to check you out, how can they find you on the internet?
You can find me on Reddit at DM Rook Writes. You can find me on Blue Sky. I believe it is also, I think it's just at dmrook.bsky.social. If not, I will give that handle for you in the description of putting the video. And you can always find me in the Immersive Ink Discord. It's where I spend a lot of my time in. And yeah, I would love to hear from people and talk to them and hope they like the book.
What is the Immersive Ink Discord?
So the Immersive Ink Discord was founded by a couple of authors, as well as the owner of Shadowlight Publishing, and pretty much everyone that has really kind of found success on Royal Road or has pushed out their books in terms of like fantasy or anything else on there is there. So Sean Wilson's there. Probably doesn't want me to drop his name, but he's there. And we have Emrys Ambrosius, who wrote Rise of the Infernal Paladin. He doesn't mind me dropping his name. We have just a bunch of people there. We're up to like 2,000 members right now. And it is a place that was built by authors and readers for authors and readers. So we really kind of focus on just fostering a very positive community, positive environment, and just kind of have fun telling stories.
Okay. And you can find us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters. We've got our Spotify, our Discord, our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our email at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. For professional purposes only, people. Save the shenanigans from Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, the Twitter, and the email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it's for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee till it pours out of their eyeballs, and then will swim away on a river of Java goodness. And if you want some of that coffee brand coffee for yourself, link is in the show notes. Use the code PODCASTGRUNTS. You get 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. It's a win-win, people. And with that, I would like to thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-hosts, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Thanks for coming on, Rook. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
All right, with that, we're going to hit the end button.